Welcome to the Rodelcast, where we discuss issues related to public education and the workforce with guests from around the state and around the world. My name is Paul Herdman, and this podcast is part of a series in an OECD project called Career Pathways in a Rapidly Changing World. We are looking at the transition from senior secondary school or high school to whatever young people decide to do next. We're looking specifically at high school programs that build meaningful work-based learning experiences into the general education courses to better prepare those students to make more informed choices. This story is about the U.S. You'll hear from policymakers and educators and students from D.C., Delaware, and Texas. In a country that is more than 4,500 kilometers wide with about 330 million people, what follows is just a snapshot, a slice of the story. This story will start with some framing from U.S. Department of Education officials and then go a bit deeper in those two states. They are very different. Delaware is a small state of about 1 billion people on the East Coast and leans blue or Democratic. Texas, with close to 30 million people, sits on the border of Mexico and leans red or Republican. Despite their differences, both states are doing leading-edge work and actively learning from and with each other on how to best support students. Since I've lived in Delaware since 2004 and am part of the Delaware Career Pathway story, while I will spend some time providing context on the first state, I will spend more time on the federal opportunity and Texas. In the resources associated with this podcast, listeners can find several blogs, case studies, and targeted podcasts on Delaware and all the jurisdictions associated with this project. To frame the national opportunity, we'll start with Assistant U.S. Secretary of Education, Amy Loyd.
As you introduced me, my name's Amy Loyd. I'm the Assistant Secretary for the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education. As I was a vice president at a nonprofit organization called Jobs for the Future, where our work was really at the intersection of education and workforce and economic development, and did a lot of the career pathways work there in partnership with you, and worked with 27 other states beyond Delaware in that work, and also got to work on our federal policy and lead that team and lead our workforce development team as well. But recognizing this unique moment in time that the pandemic created and how the pandemic really shone a light on deep inequities that had been longstanding in our education and workforce systems, but really only further deepened and widened those inequities, recognizing that now is really a moment for our nation to think differently about how we're preparing people for their futures and how we're ensuring equitable access to and engagement in high quality career pathways and making sure everybody can pursue the American dream and education lives up to the promise of economic and social mobility and all the hopes that we hold for our education system.
While states make most of the big decisions on how their students are educated, the federal government in the U.S. still provides upwards of 10% of the funding, and those dollars and the leverage associated with them can still have a meaningful impact on how states act. In 2022, the Biden administration launched an initiative to reimagine U.S. high schools called Unlocking Career Success.
And so Secretary Cardona charged me and my incredible team with thinking about how we might reimagine the high school experience around career connections. And so we've launched an initiative called Unlocking Career Success. And the way that we're thinking about it is we want every single high school student to graduate from high school with 4 keys to unlock their future career success. And again, every single student means every single student, not just those in CTE programs. And those keys are built on the foundation of what is good career and technical education. So I will say, while we're thinking about transformation of high schools writ large, we're really thinking about CTE as a vehicle for that transformation. The keys are ensuring every single student has ongoing, developmentally appropriate career and college or post-secondary education advising, navigation supports that happen over time with them and are responsive to, of course, their interests and passions and needs, but also connecting to students and families need the information about labor market information, about the prospects of their futures in any particular areas. They need the information about different post-secondary educational opportunities and recognizing that many of our educators and counselors came up through education systems and 4-year degrees were our pathway to success. But the sub-baccalaureate space has an incredible array of rewarding opportunities that are springboards to lifelong careers. And that even today, over half of us with bachelor's degrees have community college backgrounds on our transcripts, myself included. And even today, over half of high school students are enrolled in career and technical education. I feel like there's some myth busting to be done about what career-connected education is and how our counselors and our educators across the board can better support students and families in making informed decisions about their futures. And thinking about apprenticeship programs, thinking about two-year colleges, thinking about workforce credentials differently, and not just narrowly focusing on four-year college for all as the only path to success, as a great path, sure, and as one that I never want to foreclose on for any student, but helping our students receive the career counseling and advising that they really need and deserve. So that's the first key. The second is earning college credit while still in high school. And that's through dual credit or dual enrollment. And ideally, we want students to earn at least 12 college credits by the time they graduate from high school, their first English class, their first math class, so they don't get stuck in what's often a whirlpool of developmental or remedial education in post-secondary from which students very seldom emerge. The third key is meaningful work-based learning experiences. And this is a space where I've seen some incredible innovation across our country, and it's done really well in some programs. It's not done well at scale for all students anywhere that I've ever seen. It's a challenge to do at scale. How do we make sure that students can learn about careers, they can watch videos, they can have informational interviews with people, but we really want students to be in real world workplace settings that are intergenerational with professionals who are going to mentor them, provide them with feedback, help them grow their own networks of social capital and professional contacts in the field. And then the fourth key is earning at least one industry sought credential. And I use the term industry sought. I think often the field uses industry recognized. And really what we're wanting to signal here is a stackable portable credential that's part of a bigger program of study that goes through post-secondary, but that really signals to employers that students have the skills that they're seeking.
Assistant Secretary Loyd summarized the four components of the federal initiative and put it in the context of reimagining what we mean by high school.
And so as we think about four keys, career and college advising, dual credit, dual enrollment, college credit in high school, work-based learning, and industry credentials, as a way for every single student to navigate the high school experience, really transforms how students engage in high school. The Secretary is pushing on districts and schools to imagine a world in which students might spend a day or two a week outside of the classroom setting in the real world, thinking about anytime, anywhere learning and integrating real world work-based learning and community-based learning into how we consider what a well-rounded education means for students. The disruption of the pandemic turned our world upside down, turned education upside down. I feel like we still have a little bit of malleability in the system to reimagine education. We haven't completely reverted back to our calcified, this is how we've always done business, although people craved normal, quote unquote, after the pandemic. But I feel like now is our chance, if ever, to really disrupt and reimagine how high school takes place so that students really are more community and career connected.
While the federal government plays a significant role in supporting public education in the U.S., the Assistant Secretary underscored that the bulk of the responsibility still rests with the 50 states.
It's fascinating to see how different states engage differently in the work. And education in the United States is almost entirely the purview of states to determine. But by and large, states are the ones that determine curriculum. They are the ones that determine standards. They are the ones that determine graduation requirements. They are the ones who think about how and where their CTE programs are situated and how those are structured. And so our role at the Department of Education is to be in service to states and to help them do their best work.
Luke Rhine, the Deputy Assistant Secretary under Amy Loyd, has a unique perspective. While he's now helping support this work federally, he comes at this from the lens of a practitioner and is one of the architects of the Delaware Career Pathways efforts.
So I think this is the work that we should be focused on. It's really just about helping young people to realize their potential and establish trajectory and a foothold. And that's exactly what education is designed to do. It's essentially just help people become their best selves and ensure that they have a path forward that's productive for themselves, their families, their communities.
After years as an educator and state-level policymaker in Maryland, Luke made his way to Delaware, and it was his vision and ability to pull together public and private partners that helped the state advance rapidly. He and I first met on a learning visit to Switzerland a decade ago.
I then, in 2014, had the opportunity to jump over to Delaware, where I oversaw Delaware's career and technical education system, the opportunity to work with the governor and others, Paul, you specifically, for a number of years in Delaware. And then under the Carney administration and Secretary Holodick, got to oversee the CTE system, the higher ed system, the work educator prep system, and the licensure system before moving to federal service about a year ago.
And you and I, around 2014, when you first got there, met in Switzerland. That was our first time meeting. And we went there to learn a bit more, but maybe just talk a little bit about why it was intriguing for you to go there, maybe what you picked up and how that may have informed what you ended up doing back in Delaware.
Yeah. So the Switzerland trip was a lot of fun. And it was, I think, fun from a number of perspectives. The first is there was a lot of energy and interest in thinking about education to workforce systems in Delaware. And many of the folks who were leading that charge in the state wanted to ensure that we were benchmarking ourselves against those that were leading internationally and not just nationally. So I, from day one, have always enjoyed the perspective of we want to be the best in the world, not the best within our given region. I wholeheartedly subscribe to.
I asked Luke about what his thoughts were on the evolution of the work in Delaware since 2014.
Yeah, so I think there are like three things. So the first is from day one, we had a very simple goal. It's a complex statement, but it was a simple goal. And the goal was just to essentially, we wanted to create more options for students post-graduation and just help people. Another way to describe the goal. And I like the simplicity and I liked the structure around the initial goal. And it was essentially like high quality programming, supports for educators in schools, and helping to clear a path from like a policy and financial perspective. That was how I would just back of the envelope describe our strategy. And it worked. We saw a lot of schools respond. We saw students enroll in droves, and we saw increased student outcomes. And I'm pleased, very proud of all of those things. The second thing that I thought was really unique is that we were candid around where our system did and did not have supports for young people. Like when we socialized our strategic plan, one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we got was to better support students with disabilities, which was not as apparent in our original plan as it otherwise should have been. And I am pleased that we took that on kind of full steam. And we're one of the few states that actually integrates ID, or Delaware is one of the few states that actually integrates funds and vocational rehabilitation funds. And that is not what we're seeing nationally. It's about half of all states actually don't exhaust the 15% of pre-employment transition services that they're required to under Title IV of WIOA, which then reverts to the federal government. It's just a huge waste of money. And then I think the third thing that I'm proud of is that it was a partnership. It was a recognition that different actors, different institutions, different organizations are strategically positioned to do different things. But at the end of the day, our goals and what we want and the values that we each have, we're not different. And you can actually do a lot if you assemble the right team and just commit to, you know what I mean, the right set of deliverables. And I like that it was a team effort. And I don't think there was like any one organization over another that carried all of the water.
When he was back in Delaware, Luke worked for the State Secretary of Education, Mark Holodick. I've known the secretary for many years. He was an educator, a district superintendent, and higher education official in the state prior to his current role. I asked Mark about how he's seen the system change.
When I was in school, and I imagine, Paul, when you were, and many people who are educators today, or perhaps listening to this podcast, if you reflect back to when we were in, let's just say, high school was in its own silo, separate from college and the workplace, right? What we heard was you got to have your high school diploma first. And that is, of course, true. But when I say silo, high school was high school, you graduated, and then you figured out where you were going to go.
He pointed out the importance of breaking from those silos and getting out into work settings by helping me recall my first job.
You're about to move into adulthood, Think about how you operated, acted, behaved, and approached things in school at that time compared to in the workplace. And I said, my guess is you handled yourself much differently outside of school. You were almost like a different person.
Over the years, he described deeper partnerships being developed with high schools, higher education, and employers through career pathways. And he started to see those silos soften.
It's a little more seamless. It's not where I think it needs to be. I still think we see them as separate. And I think there's an opportunity for it to be, I use the term seamless.
Despite the fact that Delaware has about 70% of its high school students, or about 30,000 students, in a career pathway that include a meaningful work-based experience, as well as access to an industry-recognized credential and college credit, Secretary Holodick is candid about the challenges.
There are some equity issues that are within the system that can certainly be overcome. It's not specific to a person, but far too many people have experienced it, and that is based on your background, your national origin, the color of your skin, and of course your gender. The expectations for what it is you can do in school are influenced. And that, of course, then can lead to missed opportunities for kids. Having the data is great, but that makes it your responsibility as a leader to actually do something about it.
Despite the work ahead, the scale reached in Delaware has started to break down the stigma associated with career pathways. So students and parents are getting more comfortable with the fact that this is about helping them make a more informed choice, not a binding decision.
We tend in education, for a lot of different reasons, to get stuck and not willing to tip the apple cart from time to time and make changes that at first glance, it's like, why are we doing this? Is this, but we know in our heart of hearts, based on, again, the data, we should be doing something differently here, and we don't always do it. And so I think pathways in Delaware have, first of all, I would say pathways are something we should be incredibly proud of, right? Close to 30,000 students in a pathway. And I have two of my own children who are in pathways currently in high schools in Delaware, or in a high school in Delaware. I don't know whether they will end up working or being employed in something related to their pathway, but I know they might because they're really interested in it. But whether they do or not, I think the pathway is providing a focus and an interest in helping them develop knowledge and skills that will be helpful no matter what they end up doing. Because the one thing I never want pathways to do is pigeonhole a student. And I know that's not happening currently. And in fact, it's doing the opposite. It's opening doors for our students. I think there are more doors that could be opened.
Now let's travel some 1,500 miles or 2,400 kilometers from Delaware in the mid-Atlantic to Texas on the border with Mexico. With close to 30 million people, Texas is about 30 times the size of Delaware. Perhaps because it's a relatively small place, it's not surprising that Delaware led with relationships and implementation. In contrast, Texas, with a population greater than Australia and a landmass bigger than France, it's not surprising that the career pathways efforts seem to lead with the interests of employers and legislation. To get a handle on the legislative landscape here, I talked with Ryan Franklin, the policy director of Educate Texas, a nonprofit that works to improve student outcomes in their K-12 schools, college, and careers.
Thanks, Paul. I'm Ryan Franklin, and I'm the Senior Director for Policy and Advocacy at Educate Texas. Based in the Austin office of Educate Texas, with close proximity to the Texas Capitol, where we engage with legislators and all of our relevant regulatory agencies.
So coming from a small state, or for those who might be coming from other parts of the world outside the US, maybe set the stage a little bit about how Texas is a little different than other states.
So Texas has about 5.5 million students in K-12, about 370,000 plus educators operating in 1,200 plus independent school systems and charter management organizations. So it is a big place with lots of mix of state level policy and local control and spread out over a vast geographic area. And we have some of the largest school systems in the country and some of the very, very smallest. So it is a diverse ecosystem. Over 60% of our students are economically disadvantaged, 53% Hispanic. So just a really diverse landscape, like all the languages of the world represented in our schools and all the challenges anybody could find anywhere, we've got packed in somewhere here in the state.
In a state as large as Texas, marrying philanthropic investments and new ideas coupled with legislation has been a way that they have scaled some innovative ideas like P-TECH, or Pathways in Technology Early College High Schools.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Texas has done well over time and has become a pattern of doing things to support the front end of legislation, of implementation on a given policy, and then rewarding the back end as a way of sustaining it. And so we've seen that several times and play out in several different ways where the legislature will craft an initiative to strengthen pathways, strengthen alignment, and it will do things to invest in and support strong technical assistance on the front end with a state investment that might also pair with a philanthropic investment and maybe a workforce investment, but multiple systems coming together to support the front end implementation that's so necessary to make a change, and then supporting and recognizing outcomes on the back end as a way of doing that, not just relying on one or the other, but putting in some resources along the way. And I think we've seen that in a few different places. Texas has a really long history of supporting dual credit in the state and has done that for a long time and has funded that robustly just as a baseline. And so it's also grown in and fostered early college high schools for quite a few years. Starting in 2017, we saw several other kind of a raft of new policy efforts in this front. So one of those efforts was around the creation and establishment of state-funded P-TECH models, where students could earn both their high school diploma, industry-based credential, and very often college hours at the same time, and where the state created that model, invested in technical support and structure to get that off the ground, and then came back and put an incentive in place for each student enrolled in those models. So came back another session later and invested it as a per student allotment. That was in 2017. In 2019, the legislature established our college and career military readiness outcomes bonuses for our schools as yet another incentive, and I would argue a sustainability play to recognize those school systems that are getting students both over the readiness hurdle and to actually either directly enrolling in college or earning that high value credential while in high school. And so there's some front end support and some back end support to get there. In the most recent legislative session, the legislature tackled it's been 50 years since the legislature changed our community college funding formulas in any major way, and the legislature took that on in a really thoughtful and innovative way and really flipped the state's investment from being one about seat time to being one based on students achieving milestones toward credentials of value, earning credentials of value, successful transfer from our community college, and for the first time, differential weighting based on student characteristics. So students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, if the college gets them to earn that credential of value, they get recognized and get honored for that. And then once again, they provided front-end support for colleges in making the behavior changes, the infrastructure changes to make those changes. So I think there's a pattern here of putting some front-end support and then bolstering that on the back end to better meet the workforce needs, the needs of students, and the needs of our both K-12 and higher ed schools and school systems.
This set of incentives has encouraged school districts to collaborate in new ways. Ryan shared.
So you have to be bringing the higher ed partner the K-12 partner and the industry partner together to agree on that labor market demand within that region for making the case for why that makes sense in that particular region. And so that's a starting point in building out the model, in bringing those different voices together, and then all having a shared MOU and a shared vision of success. And that may be what specific dual credit courses are embedded in there. That may be what work-based learning or pre-apprenticeship opportunities are embedded there. But coming to the table and figuring that all out as you're planning out, and having the time to have a thoughtful plan before implementing and launching the model.
In addition to new cross-sector partnerships with districts, Texas is seeing collaboration across district lines, particularly in rural areas.
I grew up in a rural location. You're used to traveling 45 minutes one way to go to the grocery store or go get your essential things that you need for life. Hopping on the bus and spending time there, that's just a normal part of life. I think probably the bigger challenge was joining with your local high school rival or that sort of thing, and putting things together and tearing down some of those rivalries like that. But I think folks have realized that, in particular for our rural schools, to survive and thrive in those communities, they have to share resources and they have to share expertise, and they really got to join together to meet the needs of their communities, and to really think of this work as regionally instead of just hyper local at just an individual community level.
I visited San Antonio to see a rural school innovation zone and got a chance to speak with the executive director of this collaborative, Michael Gonzalez.
Yes, sir. Michael Gonzalez, Rural Schools Innovation Zone Executive Director for the last 5 years.
For those who aren't from Texas, describe a little bit about where you work, who are the kids you serve, et cetera.
Yes, sir. So the Rural School Innovation Zone encompasses about 1,500 square miles. It's 5 rural school districts in deep South Texas. Geography-wise, our biggest metropolitan area is Corpus Christi area. My nearest district to Corpus Christi is about an hour away. So we're deep on the tip of Texas, on the closer to probably the Mexico border than anything else. Our average population, we run about 90% economically disadvantaged kids, about a 94% clip of at risk. All 5 of my school districts are Title I school districts, so it's free and reduced lunch or free lunch, breakfast, and a majority of them serve dinner actually to our resident students.
In terms of the Rural School Innovation Zone, just give us sort of the high level of what is this thing?
Yes, sir. The Rural School Innovation Zone is the first of its kind independent school district collaborative in the nation. It started off in 2019 with 3 school districts. I guess the Mount Rushmore of the Rural School Innovation Zone would be Brooks County ISD, Fremont, and Freer. We've added Dulce and Benavides this past school year, so we have now 5 independent school districts collaborating to provide post-secondary opportunity successes for our students in rural Texas. We firmly believe that our zip code, area code should not determine our post-secondary success. Through pulling our resources together, our students from each school district have an opportunity to attend pathway opportunities in other school districts, but still remaining loyal to their community and coming back and participating within their local school districts. The model itself completely abolishes any kind of consolidation talk or anything like that in rural America.
Michael described what it was like for a student in the Rural School Innovation Zone.
Most of our visiting academy students travel during the mornings. So we'll use our furthest distance. Our furthest distance one way is about an hour and 25 minutes. So we would leave about 6:15 in the morning, 3 days a week, get to campus about before 8 o'clock, attend classes, either an academic elective graduation requirement class, a world geography, world history situation, plus their pathway class. We have some pathway classes that are blocked, so they're there for an hour and a half of that to receive their contact hours in CTE, whether it be welding, health science, STEM, aeronautics, cybersecurity, grow your own, teacher education. We have a wide variety of components that our kids are involved with. So then they get back on the bus, they travel back another hour and 25 minutes. I'll get there right before lunchtime, eat lunch with their peers, and then they start attending their athletic period, band period, choir periods in the afternoon classes. And then the following day, Tuesday, Thursday situation, they attend most of the core area classes. So most of my school districts run a modified block and A/B schedule that's very much aligned to a college schedule.
He also described that it can be hard for students who who have been longtime rivals in sports.
Let's get down to nitty gritty, right? Texas, Friday Night Lights, competitive sports,
Right.
athletic teams, the rivalries. Back in the good old days, Fremont and Falfurrias are 15 minutes away from each other. But you wouldn't dare cross that city line, right? And get caught after dark kind of situation. Now we're bitter rivals on Tuesday and Friday nights. We still are. But at the same time, we're picking each other up when we knock each other down, because the next day we got to see each other in welding class or STEM class or grow your own class.
In Texas, there is a 4-year design and certification process to becoming a P-TECH school. There are 276 of these schools in Texas, perhaps the highest concentration of these in the world. But because of the size of the state, these students only represent about 5% of the total student population. All 5 of the high schools in the zone are on track to be certified as P-TECH schools next fall. Michael shared what that involves.
So we run I would consider more of a P-TECH model, pathways through technology, early college, high school situation. 95% of our pathways are aligned to a dual credit component. So our kids have a chance to receive a level 1, level 2, up to an associate's degree before graduation. So in order to do that, the associate degree pathway, you have your core, you have to be college ready with our state component, with our TSI state test that we have to go administer for our kids to be college ready. The components of the options for our students are phenomenal in getting ready. So we pull all the levers, right? The early college, high school model, along with providing our kids work-based learning opportunities with pretty much free college. That's a big plus for our kids, especially in our area.
This concept of building partnerships with employers, higher education, and high schools took a range of forms in Texas. I also got a chance to visit a CAST school in San Antonio. They are a nonprofit network of 6 tuition-free, industry-led, career-themed high schools. This network was started in 2016. Here's the CAST Executive Director, Jeanne Russell, about how they got started.
About 6 or 7 years ago in San Antonio, we had been working for really decades on this, how do we improve the college going and college attainment rate in San Antonio at the community level. And we've seen some improvements, but the college going rate and the college attainment rate, unfortunately, just were consistently flat. And so business leaders in our community were asking, like, okay, if fewer than 50% of our students are going to college, what are we doing for those students to better prepare them for the jobs in our community? And particularly, there was a man, Charles Butt, who is the founder, he's the chairman of HEB, which is a locally based grocery store headquartered here. And he said, in my company, we have these amazing jobs, everything from store leader to, it's a very diversified grocery store company. And many of those people actually do not come to us via college. And so if we have a store leader, they need to know things like business math, budgets, things like that. And we are not preparing them at all for these types of jobs. So how can we look around the world, really, but also around the country to see how the K-12 system is preparing those students who, for whatever reason, do not go to college? So that was the charge initially was, and then the flip side for a lot of business leaders too was, this is a community where we have low college attainment. We have a big brain game where we were pulling in a lot of people for a variety of fields, a lot of engineers in particular. When we looked at our data, were coming from elsewhere. And was there any way to really build a talent pool from San Antonio, people who would stay here? And then the final thing about San Antonio is that historically, like zip code has been destiny in San Antonio. We are a fairly segregated city, both like ethnic or racially and economically. And we've had this concentrated multi-generational poverty. And so a number of studies have found us like one of the cities where it's the hardest to climb out of your zip code. And so we were saying, like, also, how can we break some of that sort of geographic issue up by taking some schools to communities where there hadn't been like really high quality programming specifically designed for economic mobility.
The CAST schools rely heavily on project and work-based learning and the opportunity to get up to 2 years of university training while still in high school.
I believe in this idea of graduated adulthood, like the more we can turn responsibility over to students and really believe in the students.
It's a great framing. The graduated adulthood. Yeah.
It's a very parental, I mean, that's what you do as a parent, right? You say, I want you to learn how to take risks, but in a safe space. I want you to make decisions for yourself where there are going to be natural consequences, but it's okay to fail and you learn from that, right? Because If I'm doing all that work for you, or if the teacher's doing all that work, you're not actually learning.
Here's a sampling of some of the project-based learning, or PBL, that all the students engage in. The first is about rethinking the district's food program so it was more inclusive. And another was about why certain buildings built centuries ago are still standing.
Okay, so my project is more of a social project. Mm-hmm. It's not really within the realm of the prompt they provided us. I asked if I could do something because it applies to me. So my project is implementing halal foods in school cafeterias because I'm Muslim. Other Muslims that follow the religious dietary laws, obviously they can't eat the school foods. Yesterday, I had to trade for 3 things of fries at lunch. So that's one of my main projects right now. Just trying to get it implemented all over San Antonio.
So for seniors, it's different. Okay. Well, we don't have a PBO, we have a capstone, which is our passion project. Okay. So
tell me about that.
Capstone, it's based off of what you believe in, what you want to do. Yeah. And for me, I've been fascinated with the way Roman concrete still stands today. When researching, I figured out that they actually use a different formula, which allows that concrete to glue itself back together once it's been wet or cracked. It
sounds magical.
It does. It's like limestone. Limestone builds upon itself when water touches it because of the calcium residue that's left on that, and it uses that to build upon itself. Okay. So in this concrete, it uses that same method. It uses something called calcium hydroxide, which is a component in limestone called slacklime. And once it's cured in seawater, it has to be seawater, not any other type. Once it's cured in seawater, it traps those sulfides and those chlorides, and it builds new materials in there. So that way, when it's ready, it can last even longer.
These students also engaged in work-based learning. Here's a student sharing a lesson about dealing with people while working in a restaurant.
So there, I learned how difficult people can be. Because customers, even though the motto says that they're always right, they're not always right. So I had to learn how to manage those people, even when they were yelling at me or being difficult. Right. And I learned the value of hospitality and how to control my anger when it's with certain type of people.
And this senior engineering student learned about the value of teamwork while doing an internship at Toyota.
So there they taught us about pneumatics, electrical wiring, motor circuits, motor changes, and they even taught us how to teach and move the robots there. So what they did was they put us in groups of 3, and we had to work with them throughout the 7 weeks over the summer. And me, I'm a loner sometimes. I don't really talk. I don't really ask for help. And when I was struggling on trying to wire up a circuit board, one that I knew how to do, but I just couldn't get it right this time. I was getting frustrated. And after about 2 hours, I finally gave up and I realized I had to go and communicate because that's what that industry is based off of, communication. Sure. Otherwise, the entire day would be for nothing if something were to happen. So what I did was I communicated to my team members, that's what they're called there, and they showed me what was actually wrong. So everything was right. I just wired something, like the wire wasn't in the circuit board completely.
America is a vast place, and each state is building their own approach to career pathways. The efforts in Delaware and Texas are still growing, and they both face challenges around equity, transportation, aligning of resources, capturing the data they need to continuously improve. But there was a level of optimism about taking the risk of breaking new ground. Michael Gonzalez captured it this way.
But if step off the ledge and take that chance, because when you take the chance and you're putting kids first, not in theory, but in actual practice, you can't go wrong. And when you start providing these opportunities and access to every student in rural America, you're going to see huge benefits and you'll reap the rewards going forward because those kids will come back to community and enhance what's going on and make it even better. And it's going to make our jobs as educators easier. That's the way I look at things.
Thank you for listening to this podcast on career pathways in the U.S. And I look forward to sharing more stories from Australia, Scotland, Canada, and New Zealand in the weeks and months ahead. If you want more information on this project, please visit us at rodellde.org. A special thanks to Amy Loyd and Luke Rhine at the U.S. Department of Education, Mark Holodick at the Delaware Department of Education, Ryan Franklin at Educate Texas, Michael Gonzalez at the Rural School Innovation Zone, Hannah Scharfman at Empower Schools, Jeanne Russell, and the faculty and students at the CAST STEM School for their time and insights. This episode was produced and edited by Alejandra Villamares and contains original music from Jesse Herdman. The larger project was done in cooperation with our team here at Rodell in Delaware and with the OECD team in Paris. None of this would have been possible without the generous support from the Carnegie Corporation of New York and the Rodell Foundation. Thank you. Until next time.